Gordon, the big engine, had to work harder than ever before. "Come on," he called to the coaches. "Come on, come on, come on. The passengers rely on me to be on time." "Never mind," he puffed. "I like a long run to stretch my wheels." Even so, Sir Topham Hatt decided that Gordon needed a rest. Just then, Gordon arrived. "Puh," said Gordon. "Who cares? A lot of fuss about nothing, if you ask me." And he steamed away. He left early next morning. Gordon was still complaining. "Good riddance," he grumbled, "chattering all night. Who is he, anyway? As famous as me? Nonsense." "Huh, so he says," huffed Gordon, "but I didn't like his looks. He's got no dome. Never trust domeless engines. They're not respectable. I never boast, but I'd say 100 miles an hour would be easy for me. Goodbye." "Look, he's coming now." Gordon was running very fast. His wheels pounded the rails. "He did it, I'll do it. He did it, I'll do it." Gordon's train rocketed past and was gone. Gordon's driver eased him off. "Steady, Gordon. We aren't running a race." "We are, then," said Gordon, but he said it to himself. Suddenly, Gordon began to feel a little strange. "The top of my boiler seems funny," he thought. "It feels as if something is loose. I'd better go slower." But it was too late. Gordon thought it wanted to push him off the bridge. "No, you don't," he said firmly. But the wind had other ideas. It curled round his boiler, crept under his loose dome, and lifted it off and away into the valley below. Gordon was most uncomfortable. The cold wind was whistling through the hole where his dome should be, and he felt silly without it. At the big station, the freight cars laughed at him. Gordon tried to wheesh them away, but they crowded round no matter what he did. On the way back to the shed, he wanted his driver to stop and fetch his dome. "We'll never find it now," said the driver. "You'll have to go to the works for a new one." Gordon was very cross. "I hope the shed is empty tonight," he huffed to himself. But all the engines were there waiting. "Never trust domeless engines," said a voice from somewhere behind him. "They aren't respectable." Next morning, the switches were mended and Percy puffed back to the junction. Gordon was just about to leave with the express. Gordon was in no mood for puzzles. "I'm a busy engine. I don't have time for your games." Gordon snorted. "You've been in the sun too long. Your dome has cracked." The engines were resting in the shed. If Gordon wasn't here now, I'd say it was him thundering by with the express. All the engines laughed. Mud had blown all over his smart blue paint. "Hello, Gordon," called Thomas. Gordon snorted. "I haven't time to dawdle over my appearance like fussy tank engines do." The wind blew stronger. "Gordon, slow down," called his driver. This made Gordon crosser still. "Now I'll be dirty and late, he hissed. At the next station was a sign. "Bah," said Gordon, and angrily let off steam. "Good riddance," huffed Gordon. "I'm far too busy to waste time with water." He finished his journey safely and steamed into the big station. Sir Topham Hatt was waiting. "You can't pull the train. Henry will have to do it." Gordon was soon being washed. "Mind my eyes," he grumbled. Then he pulled cars for the rest of the day. Freight trains, he spluttered. He felt his position deeply. That's for you, and you, and you. Cars will be cars, laughed James. They won't with me, snorted Gordon. I'll teach them. Be careful, warned Gordon. The hills are slippery. You may need help. Gordon thinks he knows everything. Gordon saw everything. Ah, well, we live and learn. Never mind, little James. I'm going to push behind. We can do it, puffed James. We will do it, puffed Gordon. Thank you. Goodbye, whistled James. Boop, boop, answered Gordon. Goodbye. That night, Sir Topham Hatt came to see the engines. Gordon was miserable. Thank you, grunted Gordon. Dirty or clean, I'm a famous machine. But no one heard but him. Later, he was still boasting. I saw you pulling freight cars, snorted Gordon. You're only a goods engine. I pull coaches, too. Not as much as I do. What plans? Wait and see. Oh, dear, he thought. Now what'll I do? And a few minutes later, Gordon arrived. Where's the express? Gordon was very cross, and so was his driver. Wait till Sir Topham Hatt hears about this. The other engines teased James. I wonder who'll be pulling the express today, said Gordon. James is stuck in the shed for being silly. Here, there, and everywhere. Take that! Oh, groaned the freight cars. Just you wait. We'll show you. Gordon laughed. I'll tell you what, James. If you pretended to be ill everywhere, you couldn't shunt freight cars here or go to the quarry there, could you? Here comes Thomas. I'll start pretending now. Thomas was sorry to see the engines looking miserable. Yes, grumbled Gordon, but not for James. He's sick, replied Gordon. Yes, he is. I mean, I am, stuttered James. I don't feel well at all. Gordon and James snickered quietly to each other. Later, James spoke to Thomas. I'm sorry about your accident, he muttered, and so is Gordon. We didn't mean to get you into trouble. No, indeed, spluttered Gordon. A mere misunderstanding, Thomas. All's well that ends well. Just then, Bertie arrived. He looked much more cheerful. Gordon and James puffed silently away to the shed, taking on a large supply of coal. That's the third load of coal you've had today, Gordon, said James. Some might... Important engine, replied Gordon. Important engines need plenty of coal, but I doubt if you would understand that, James. James snorted and went about his work. Gordon was taking on water from a standpipe because the water tower was under repair. Drink too much of that water if I were you, Gordon. It might give you, said Gordon. What's this, educating Gordon Day? First James, now you, Duck. Big engines have big needs. Little engines are just annoying. Don't say... Gordon steamed into the yard at the big station. I need, exclaimed Gordon. There emerged... I had 2 tenders, said Gordon. I wouldn't need to stop so often, and I wouldn't have to listen to silly little engines. Those tenders belong to a visitor, replied his driver. Pulled up alongside. Everyone knows that tenders are a mark of distinction, but I'm afraid that no amount of tenders will save you in the end. We Diesels are taking over, and we don't know. Was most upset. He was feeling just the same next day. I'm not happy. Boiler ache, protested Gordon. It's... Of course, huffed Gordon. He backed down onto his train, hissing mournfully. Cheer up, Gordon, said Sir Topham Hatt. I can't, sir. Is it true what Diesel says, sir? What does he say? Taking over. Don't worry, sir. Why did the visitor have 2 tenders? Because he lives on a... Better. Waited where they could each get a good view. But Henry wasn't a splendid sight at all. His 6 tenders were... Had a good washout, Henry, called a voice. That's right. You'll feel a different engine now. Henry was not sure, but he thought the voice belonged to Gordon. Next day, Douglas told the other engines all about Oliver. Douglas should tell him at once, added Gordon. Well, yes, sir, ventured Gordon. A steam engine, sir. Well, everyone cheered. The other engines all wanted to know about Oliver's adventures. And sagacity, put in Gordon. He is, finished Gordon, an example to us all. Every wise engine knows that you cannot trust freight cars. The other engines warned Oliver, but he... Gordon spoke severely to them. You must behave here. You're on the main line now. Gordon was cross. Just make sure that my coaches are ready for my evening train. And he fumed away. Gordon and the passengers waited impatiently outside the... But by the time Gordon was able to leave, it was very late indeed. It was a splendid morning on the island of Sodor. Night, the shed was silent. At last, Thomas spoke. Still, there was silence. So, said a voice. Then came a chorus. We're really useful engines after all. When the engines woke the next morning, they could not believe their eyes. Engines whistled in delight, and everyone agreed that it was a really happy Thanksgiving.
But, added Duck, it must have a happy ending. It was a beautiful night on the island of Sodor. The day's work was done, and the engines puffed safely home. Said Henry, especially the happy ending. And soon, they were all asleep, too. The other engines were still dozing, but not Percy. Driver should be here by now. What's he doing? Sleeping, grunted Gordon. The very same, said Thomas. Driver told me the story. Listen. Hello, who are you? I'm Gordon. Who are you? I'm Sir Han, but I'm used to new coaches, not these cattle cars. Do you have new coaches? Must keep time, you know. Gordon was speechless. Clouds of... No one understands our feelings, sympathized Gordon. Now, if you were ill, you couldn't shunt cars, could you? Send Rusty packing! Send Rusty packing! Snorted Duncan. The next day, Rheneas came home. All the engines were there to greet him. Edward pushed his truck to the siding. Everyone was happy, and Rheneas was the happiest of all. Rusty had an idea. Can you help me find another engine? From far away, an engine whistled. Stepney puffed proudly through the junction. Then Stepney set off to help Duck shunt coaches in the yard. Soon they heard an unfamiliar puffing sound. There was Stepney with his headlamp swaying and whistle blowing. Stepney's visit to Sir Topham Hatt's railway was coming to an end. The diesel surveyed the shed. The engines glared. Next morning, they held an indignation meeting round the turntable. Disgraceful! Hello, you're early, said Gordon. That's one in the headlamp for old Diesel. Serves him right for saying we're out of date. And Gordon chortled away. Next day, everyone came to say goodbye to Stepney. Can see us soon, whistled the engines. Then he puffed away. But the big engines were not feeling cheerful at all. He edged angrily onto the turntable and spoke rudely to Henry. Oh, whistled Percy. So you've heard the news? What news? The circus has arrived, explained. The engines soon forgot to be tired and cross. Until it was time for the circus to leave. Then Gordon and Henry were cross all over again when James got to pull the train away. Gordon and James felt sorry for Henry, but still teased him. First the rain, then an elephant. Whatever will you be afraid of next? Silence, called Sir Topham Hatt. Can you come to the station instead? Thank you very much. Hooray! Hooray! The engines whistled. Silence! 8 o'clock next morning, the engines waited at the junction. James and Henry were waiting to lead off. Sir Topham Hatt looked at his watch. Engines cheered, "Look out, big city, here we come!" And the cavalcade puffed away. Later in the big city, all the engines were lined up in a splendid shed. Gordon, the big engine, and Thomas, the tank engine, puffed buffer to buffer back home. It had been a busy day. First, Thomas had teased Gordon about the time that the big engine had slid into a ditch. Then Thomas fell down a mine and Gordon came to his rescue. "Remember, Thomas," called Gordon grandly, "united we stand, together we fall. You help me, and I'll help you." "I'll remember," replied Thomas, "but I hope Sir Topham Hatt forgives us soon." Suddenly, they noticed something. As the two engines whistled into the sheds, "Bust my buffers," said Thomas. "What's happening?" "Queen herself is coming here to visit us." "I'm in disgrace," sighed Gordon. Gordon and Thomas were waiting for him. Please, sir. One at a time," replied Sir Topham Hatt. "Yes, Gordon?" "May Thomas have his branch line again? I think you are both sorry and deserve a treat. Gordon will pull the train." Then Gordon whistled as he approached the station. Everyone knew that sound. The Queen's train glided into the station. Gordon was spotless and his brass shone brightly. When it was time to leave, the Queen spoke specially to Thomas, who fetched her coaches, and finally to Gordon, who took her away.
Said Gordon. "What's this? Educating Gordon Day? First James, now you, Duck. Big engines have big needs. Little engines are just annoying."